All right, I got some project bikes piling up, so I really got to get this little Bianchi finished. Really the last thing to do is to set up the derailleur cables and housing and do all our final double checks, tighten downs, and test rides. So we're going to start with that. Like always, I like to start by getting an old piece of cable and housing, test fitting it. Really huge long loop. I love this. Everyone else hates it. Might shorten it up just a little bit so people aren't quite as annoyed by it. People are afraid it catches on things, but everyone makes them so short that they kink and cause a bunch of friction right at the end, and that's terrible. So I'm going to say let's compromise by going about here. Taking about 2¼ inches or so off of this random piece I already got here. We're going to trim this down to size by holding this piece up. Give her a little snip. Just going to stick this back in here for now so I know which one it is and where it goes. I'm going to use this piece and move on to the next little bit. This is a bare cable to underneath the bare bottom bracket guide. And then it's going to shoot up. It's got a little double down tube cable stops right here. And from here, it's going to shoot up to the shifter. We want to make sure this piece of housing doesn't pop out of the braze-ons while we turn the wheel all the way lock to lock, because we know that would mean it would be way too short. I want to make sure it's not rubbing on anything. I like it. I say it's good. Let's see what the other side looks like as well. I'm going to call this perfect, so I'm going to cut 2 new lengths exactly the same as this old length, because it fits just fine. But you never want to just assume it's fine. You always want to double check it, because it's often way too short or way too long and rubbing and binding up on stuff. It doesn't have to be perfect, so I'm just getting it real close. Go on snip. Doing another one real close. And snip. So we got 2 matching ones for the front, 1 slightly shorter one for the back. Take my little pokey tools and make sure this little inner plastic is open. There's like a little clear tube in here. It's got some lube and stuff in it. Make sure it's nice and open for the housing to go through. We're also going to take a file and just make sure these guys are flat. Or if you have a bench grinder, you can just carefully kind of buzz it a few times right into the bench grinder and make sure it's nice and flat. Looking at them, all these cuts are really flat. I'm not going to be able to change it with the bench grinder, or I'm not going to be able to change it with the file any better. The shift housing is 4mm. It's for index shifting, so it's compressionless. It's little straight wires in there to make sure it doesn't move or flex as you shift, where brake and non-index shifting is a little stainless coil, so it can move and flex a little bit. This stuff needs to be more precise. It's got special little plastic hard ferrules stick on there. Got 6 of these dudes, 1 for each side. You really have to run this. People try and use this compressionless on old bikes. Same with friction shifting. You can use this, people do it all the time, but why bother? It'd be better to also find the 4mm housing, or if it can fit, I often just use regular brake housing for vintage shifters. I got all these in here, and I'm going to tap them all on a hard surface, really trying to set them down in place, because it's terrible to get these on, get the shifting all set up, and then as soon as you go test ride it, you shift real hard, it sucks on a little bit better, and you're out of adjustment again. But that's why we leave a lot of barrel adjuster room. Speaking of barrel adjuster room, I'm going to check this guy, thread it all the way down, then bring it back just a couple of turns, just so you can see a little bit of silver barrel adjuster popping up out of the black plastic under the spring. Just so we have, if we over tighten it, we have a little bit to loosen it back up to where it goes, and we have a lot to keep tightening it and adjusting it as things stretch or wear or do whatever they do. Pop one of these guys into each side. Same thing, we're going to check this barrel adjuster all the way in, back it out, a couple of turns, all the way in, back it out a couple of turns. The front barrel adjuster is very important, more so than the rear, because fronts, derailleurs often need to have so much insane amounts of cable tension. Sometimes you have to really maximize that whole barrel adjuster. Now, since we know these are pre-lubed cables, everything's fine. We can, or pre-lubed housing, everything's fine. We can unwrap these cables. Sometimes in these kits, one is longer than the other. The long one's for the rear and the short one's for the front. So I'm going to open them all the way up and make sure they're either the same or that I have them separated. I'm trying to be real gentle unwinding these guys, even though I'm doing a terrible job. Because if you put any kinks in it, your bike will never shift right. These cables have to be perfectly straight and flush and nice everywhere. Any kink at all, you try and shift, and all you're really doing is undoing the kink a little bit and making really mushy, horrible shifts. It's kind of the same for brakes. So these cables are definitely the same size, so I don't have to worry about them too much. Set one aside, gently and delicately. Now our shift levers, if you remember, are still opened up. There's a little screw under there. Opened up so that we can run the cables in. I shifted it all the way up into the gear where the little cable sits, so like a little cup pops up with a hole in it. So we run this guy in correctly. Sometimes I like to catch and stick up. So I'm going to run it in to the shifter. There it is. There we go. Sometimes it feels like it will not go through, and you just have to sort of wiggle it around to really get the little holes to line up. Everything's cool, it's poking right through. Now I'm lining this piece of housing up, and I'm going to push, push, push. Gently, 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 and it's popped right out down here, no problem. Just going to pull it all the way through, make sure this head seats correctly. Oh, yep, seats right down in there. Nice and tight, it's not sitting up on a ledge or on an edge. We also have to guide it underneath this bottom bracket guide. Get it in there sitting correctly and pull it all the way through. And the same thing on this rear derailleur. Just line it up and push it through. And it came right out nice and smooth. The cable only goes in to the shifter in the correct gear, in the first gear basically. So we know it's pretty good. We know this is on the lowest gear. Everything's set up, so I'm just going to low working tension bolt this guy in. I'm not pulling it tight. I'm not trying to move the derailleur and add tension now. I'm just putting it in about where it goes. Sometimes I do pull it a little tight and add a little tension. They're not supposed to. It really works better once you know what you're doing. I'm just going to low working tension, just kind of barely tighten this cable down. Not going crazy, not pinching it, not mangling it in case we have to pull it tighter or looser or move it around. Usually cutting the cables is sort of the last step, but sometimes they're just in the way. I'm going to do it now, nice and long. Couple inches so we can grab it, but not so long it's going to hit your heel or your pedal while you're trying to pedal and knock the cap off and make it get all frayed. Same thing, my favorite way of doing it wrong. Those big giant crescent pliers. Stick that dude all the way in. Slide it all the way on. One good solid pinch so it won't pull off. I'm going to do the front the same way but from a better angle. You can kind of see that little hole deep down in the shifter. There it is. We're going to run this guy in. You can see I pulled this out to get it out of the way. Pull this piece of housing out. I'm going to run this guy in, make sure it moves nice and free. And just pull, 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 until it pops out down here. Pulling it all the way down, making sure, get a good angle, making sure it seats all the way down, not sitting up on the edge. Perfect. Now you can see, I'm on the bottom bracket. We got the cable coming down the down tube. We got the little plastic guide. All bikes are different, but this is the real common style. I'm going to run it through that plastic guide and then up, behind, the seat tube here so I can go to the front derailleur. Pull it nice and tight, make sure everything's seated everywhere. Do the same thing, they all run a little different, you never really know. I think this one just runs right up. It goes right between the derailleur and this little piece of metal under the pinch bolt. Easy peasy. Try and find the old wear marks from where the old one ran if you're not 100% sure. We know the shifter is in the tightest spot, in the highest, because it's the easiest gear. We know the derailleur is sitting all the way in, so it's in the right spot as long as the limit screws are installed correctly. So I'm just going to do the same thing and lightly, low working tension, just kind of tighten this guy in. Nope. I decided to double check, look up at the bars to make sure everything was sitting where it's supposed to, and it's not. This guy's all popped out, so we tighten it down. It's going to have a bunch of slack. Push that back in. Come down to this down tube, make sure it's pushed in, make sure this cable is pulled real nice and taut. Pulling the cable nice and taut. Everything's taut, everything's sitting where it's supposed to. Running the cable, what appears to be in the correct place, between the derailleur and the pinch bolt. Just barely snugging it up. Same thing, I'm going to trim it now just so it's a little bit out of the way. Give me a couple inches to yank and squeeze on. Same thing, got this guy loaded in. One real good squeeze, and it's pretty much out of the way. And then at the end, I kind of bend this out of the way so it's not rubbing the tire or hitting anything. You always leave these too long or coiled up or rubbing stuff. It's no good. Now we're going to go ahead and start with the rear derailleur. I'm going to turn the wheel and give this little shifter a single click. And one click should pull the chain, should derail the chain up onto the next ring, and did not. So it's going to add a little bit of tension. So we hope it does. Oh, there it goes. I'm also going to grab this guy and just try and, without pulling it here, we're going to try and make sure everything's seat and tight. We'll come back down. Yeah, it still shifts down. Almost shifted up. So I tried, just barely missed it. And add a little more tension. All right, one more click up. Shifts good, shifts good. Almost. And so every click we do should shift up one ring perfectly. But now the trick is coming back down is the same thing. Every click should drop it. And if it doesn't drop, it means we have too much tension. If it doesn't go up, it means we have too little tension. There are also limit screws on the derailleur and a B-tension screw that all work like door stops. So if this thing shifted up and over the ring, we know that the top door stop or limit screw isn't in far enough, or doesn't shift down the little one, we know that one's in too far. The B-tension screw is really to set this chain gap right here. So when we go all the way up, we need to see about 1 centimeter right there between this tooth and that tooth. Some guys don't even mind more, a couple centimeters. Shimano's kind of notorious for having these B-tension screws. Never really getting you where you want. This one is not in at all. And I might put it in because I like a little B-tension. You don't want the pulley to rub on the cassette. Sometimes they put the B-tension screw in far enough, it sort of misses the whole door stop that's built into the frame. It just falls behind it and doesn't do anything either. And there's all sorts of tricks. You can get longer B-tension screws. You can put them upside down so the screw head hits that little door stop. All right, now that looks like it's hitting just fine. Go for it again. One, drop it down. And sometimes it hesitates a little bit, and you're supposed to get rid of that. but honestly it's not that big a deal if it's just a little bit. Usually once I get on the street and do a test ride, it shifts different under a weight. You need to adjust it again anyways. You can see it's hesitating and lagging and not going up. I'm going to add a little more tension. All the way back down, one click. Perfect. One click. Perfect. One click. Perfect. One click. Perfect. Perfect. Sometimes Shimano is a little shy. So if you kind of do like 3/4 of a click instead of the full click, it pretends like it's trying to shift and pretends like there's something wrong, but really you just need to push that shifting button with some real conviction. So that's great. Now we're going to kind of check the front derailleur. So we're going to spin. One click. And nowhere near enough tension. 2 clicks and it shifts up. Oh, you little brat. Doesn't want to go down either. So running the risk of the chain falling off on the inside, I'm going to let out the little door stop adjuster limit screw just a little bit because I want the chain to be able to fall in for a nice easy shift. I did nothing, it's probably the wrong ones. Try the other one, see what happens. Yep. So the top one is the inside, the front one's the inside, and the back one's the outside, which is counterintuitive and weird. Alright, now it drops down. Now we're going to do one shift up. And it should go shift in the middle, and it does not. So what it needs is a bunch more cable tension. You can sort of tell I can grab the actual cable, physically add tension this way, just like you're pulling the shifter or turning the barrel adjuster. So it needs quite a bit more tension to actually get it up. So this only has the barrel adjuster up on the actual shift lever. So I'm going to twist it here. And righty-tighty actually makes it looser. So you got to go lefty to add more tension to make it tighter. So I have to give it several turns and we'll see what happens. One shift. Oh, and there it is. One shift. It's not rubbing on the inside plate. You don't hear it. One more click. Oh, not quite. And it could be that this derailleur needs to be adjusted as well. We left it on from just where it was. I want it to come in a little bit more, but maybe it has to get angled in a little bit more. Okay, now it's kind of shifting like normal. And we're in the low gear, which is like the big one. So I'm going to shift it all the way down to the high gear, which is the littlest one, or the hardest one. We're going to do it again. What you're hearing now is cross-chaining. The chain's rubbing the outside cage because we're on the inner ring over here and the outer ring back here. The chain's at an extreme angle, so that's all right. Sometimes you just have to fiddle and fight and try it in both gears. On the back, the high and the low, going up and down several times. Sometimes you gotta loosen this and futz with it. And this derailleur is just not being our friend, like most very cheap front derailleurs never are. It goes from not being able to shift up to falling right off in the next try. Cheap junk. Should have made this bike a 1x. Okay, so the front derailleur has been a little bit of a nightmare. So I really came here, looked at it, and double-checked my settings. Started on the small string, the easiest string on the inside. And really made sure that it wasn't rubbing anywhere incorrectly. And even though the gap's way too big here, I was trying to fix that. It turns out, in the big ring, it was rubbing up on the top of the derailleur, the chain. So I actually moved it up higher than it was. And set up the inner plate, so it's about even with the inside face of that looks about even with the middle chainring. And set the low limit screw down to this little easy gear, so it wouldn't fall off, drop right down, not fall off, be perfect. And that magically seemed to have solved all my problems. So now I just shift with the cable. It seems like it's shifting exactly how it's supposed to and not falling off anywhere. It's funny how sort of starting over and setting everything up correctly and in the correct order, where nothing's rubbing or hitting incorrectly, solves all your problems. And trying to fight and mangle and will it to do what you want in the wrong position just doesn't really work. Front derailleurs are just little finicky nightmares. Just going to go ahead and do the grips and do the final adjustment of the levers. I finish this bike off before the little test ride, the little final tune, just because I'm trying to decide. I'm going to go with these little blue silicone grips, give just a splash of color, or if we're going to go boring and black, because everything else is black and it'll probably match better. I really like the idea of the blue. I also have some ugly yellow ones, might kind of match. Let's try those too. Yellow. You know what? I like the yellow. I never thought I'd say that. It's weird. It's bright. It's cool. This bike needs a little color. They do make bright yellow fenders as well. Maybe it'll get some yellow fenders. Safeten it up a little bit. So yellow it is. The first step in installing any grips or bar tape is to wash your hands. Doesn't matter if you think they're clean. Wash them anyways. You'll absolutely get a smudge on it. You'll hate yourself. These are silicones. They do wipe off real easy, which is nice. But we're still going to wash our hands. To hold these up and make sure I've got enough room, we don't. Slide this lever down. We change the bar angle, so we're going to change this lever a bunch anyways. I'm just going to slide it down, out of the way, tighten it down. Same with the other one, just giving ourselves a little room for now. Could use a little isopropyl alcohol, a little mister. Just barely missed this. Make my hands smell real bad. It dries real fast, so try and get this on. Working them on, sometimes you can push from the back. If you put too much alcohol on, sometimes they really won't dry. They'll slip and move, and it's dumb, so I prefer fighting them a little bit more than putting them on too easy. I know it's weird, but if we had a compressor, we could blow them on. That's really the rightest way of doing it. Alright, got it on. These guys squish and compress some, so if you put them on too tight, they might move and stretch a little bit later on, pop off the end. Kind of making sure they're all the way on, nice and free. Got the bar end plug. People don't think this is important. It is. As long as it fits. Oh, this is a thick bar. Give it a gentle tap with a plastic mallet. See if that helps. Pretty cool. The other side's kind of the same thing. Give it a gentle misting of isopropyl alcohol. A little bit in there. Bar end plug out. See if we can wiggle and squeeze and slip. And the alcohol lets it slide on, but then will dry. Either evaporate completely or kind of act like glue, as long as there's not too much and it can actually dry. So rubbing this on, I'll get it all the way on. No tension, nice and long. And that's on. Same thing with this little end cap. Try and put it on. Nice, gentle rubber mount. It's not going to damage or break or mar it up. All the way on. And I'll expand a little bit to fill that little gap on the end. Wiggle it down a little bit. Now I'm going to redo the lever setup. I'm looking down. Hands are nice and comfortable. We have a 1/4 inch gap between the actual shifter brake lever combo clamp and the actual grip. And get us at a nice, comfortable angle. You don't want to be lifting up. You don't really want them even level. You want them right where your shoulder and arms come down, into the most natural spot. I even like mine like too low. You can't even see the lever, but nice natural spot. We can still see it, so your brain doesn't panic and think it's not there. You won't be able to find it when you need to stop. And this should allow you to hit the shifters nice and easy too. So you have to move your whole hand and do crazy stuff if you're going to break your shift, break your concentration from just riding what's going on the road. Same thing on the other side. About a 1/4 inch. I'm also eyeballing them so I can see the same amount of lever hidden behind the grip. So they're even. Having it look really nice. Now, we just have to get this bike on the road, do some test rides, and make sure the brakes don't squeal and everything stops and shifts like it should on the road. We will probably have to do a little bit of barrel adjuster turns to make sure everything's right, and quite possibly, hi Scout, good girl, and quite possibly a little brake pad adjustments. Make sure they're not squealing and hitting just right, but V-brakes don't usually squeal, and these black pads don't usually squeal, so we're probably golden. And then we just gotta sell this bike. All right, now we're gonna do our final double checks, safety adjustments, tightenings, all that kind of stuff. First thing I'm gonna do is look at these bars and the angle they are with the front wheel. So I'm gonna stand over the bike, you can pinch it, so you can look at the tire. You can try and line this tire up with the stem. Or you can use the top tube and eyeball it, make sure the stem's going perfectly straight. You can loosen the stem with the stop bolt, wiggle the bar until the stem's nice and straight, and then tighten it down again. Another thing I like to do is change the angle of the bars. So where the end of the bars sort of point up or down or flat, these ones were way up, which would be very uncomfortable in the wrists. So I already loosened them and rolled them down flat a little bit earlier. And you do that by just whatever bolts hold the bar tight to the stem. You loosen those guys just a little bit, you can wiggle the bars, you wiggle them straight, you wiggle them down, and retighten them up. This is a 2-bolt faceplate. So with this you need to tighten one side, tighten the other, come back and double check them both a couple of times. Make sure that the torque's even. You can see this little slit up here. You want to make sure this slit is a nice even gap on both sides. It's all tight on one side and giant on the other side. The bar is going to slip, the bolts could bend or break. While we're here, I like to look at the brake pads. Make sure they're still nice and even on both sides. You're really going to look at from the angles and make sure both the front and the back aren't too high or low. They're not bent or weird. Do the same thing on the back. We can sight the back seat. I like to make sure it's not too loose so it won't slip or twist or move on a heavier rider. I also like to make sure it's straight. Now the straight thing's not as important because some people actually need their saddle at a slight angle to keep it from pinching or being very uncomfortable. But you can always just slightly loosen it and just tap, tap, tap the nose until it's dead straight and then retighten it. This was a little loose, I already retightened it. Now it's perfect. We know the quick releases are in nice and tight. We know we tightened down the derailleurs, but we can always double check, make sure all these pinch bolts are nice and tight. And then the last thing, and very important thing, is this headset adjustment. Stand over the bike, grabbing the front brake, holding it tight, and wiggling the bike back and forth. We're trying to see if we can feel any play in this headset. Sometimes you gotta turn it, you feel the play in the brakes, sometimes I turn it sideways and do the same thing, so you can't feel the brakes trying to go back and forward, you can only feel the fork trying to go back and forward, back and forward. Then there's no play, it still turns buttery smooth. So make sure this top nut, oh I see, yeah, I left it nice and loose. So I'm turning it and watching the nut below it to make sure it doesn't tighten as well. It doesn't have to be crazy, you don't want to pull threads or damage anything, just snug. Nothing moved, I'm going to double check it, still buttery smooth. Still no play. One last little important step, well, might not be that important, but we got the little plugs for the shifters. Probably wouldn't matter if they're lost, but it's really nice and really pro to not lose them and to have them. Hi Scout, hi babe, hi, hi. Yeah, we'll go out in a minute. Just feeding those back into place. Just little plastic screws, so just be gentle. If you get it with the right angle, they'll just go right back in. Barely snug them up so you don't strip them. Cool. I've been meaning to do this step forever, I've been putting it off. But there's still a little bit of sticker residue on here. So I got a little glue gone. This brand I like, it seems to not damage paint or mess things up. There's another brand kind of like it that seems to damage paint and mess things up. So pour a little bit on this nice lint-free paper towel. Just going to try and rub it in gently. Let's get all this sticker residue off. Switch to a clean spot. So Switch to a dry spot. You can always use a degreaser or rubbing alcohol if you want to get all the residue off. Ooh, it's like cleaning up this little sticker without taking it off too. It's nice. Oh, that looks fantastic. I thought we damaged that. Look at that. Now this bike is ready for a test ride. Went ahead and got festive. My little bike hat. It's my cool old one with a little Star Michael Bowman logo. Went ahead and added a little paddle fender. We'll clamp on one real quick. And a nice yellow shirt to match the yellow grips. Do some test riding. Post-test ride analysis. The front just wouldn't really shift on the road like it should. So I brought it back in, did a little bit more, just let out the screws a little bit. Chain only falls off the stand, it won't fall off in the road. So I let them out a little bit to make it shift right. And change the tension just a little bit. The seat moved on me because it was too loose, so I tightened it up. And this righty-tighty became a righty-loosey. And when something goes righty-loosey, that means the threads are stripped. It's destroyed. I need to replace this clamp. So that's the next move, is finding a clamp. I gotta dig around and see if I got one. If not, I have to go to the store, hope they have one, and drop the $5 on it. Here you can see that bolt for the seat. What I mean by stripped. It just pulled all those threads and flattened them out, destroyed. So all this nut was ever gonna do was just spin and spin and spin and never tighten it down. So I'm glad I had an extra seat clamp and got it replaced. Post test ride number 2, the bike's done. It ships perfect on the street. Seat clamp didn't come loose. Everything felt great. Brakes felt great. And we're gonna call it awesome.